The wind was cold that evening, sweeping through the empty parking lot of a small gas station on the edge of town. Most people had hurried home to escape the chill, but an elderly woman named Margaret stood by her rusted sedan, holding a worn leather purse close to her chest. Inside it were the last $10 she had, just enough for a small meal and a few groceries to last her through the week. As she counted the crumpled bills, a deep roar broke through the quiet, the sound of a motorcycle pulling into the lot. A tall man wearing a leather jacket, his face smeared with road dust and exhaustion, parked beside her. His bike sputtered once, then went silent. He cursed under his breath and pulled off his helmet, revealing tired, sunburned eyes. Margaret glanced at him, cautious but curious. The man looked rough, the kind of person most people avoided. But there was something in his expression, not anger, not arrogance, just desperation. He sighed and muttered, "Guess I'm walking from here." Margaret hesitated, then asked softly, "Are you all right, son?" The biker looked up, startled that anyone had even spoken to him. "Ran out of gas," he said. "Wallet got stolen at a diner a few towns back. Guess this is the end of the road for me tonight." Margaret felt a twinge in her chest. She knew what it meant to be stranded, to feel helpless and invisible. She looked at the $10 bill in her hand, her dinner money, her survival for the week, and for a moment she stood frozen between need and compassion. Then she took a deep breath, walked toward the biker, and pressed the bill into his hand. "Get yourself some gas," she said with a shaky smile. "And maybe a sandwich, too. You look like you need it more than I do." The man stared at her, disbelief written all over his face. "Ma'am, I can't take this. You don't even know me." Margaret smiled softly. "Maybe that's why I should." "Kindness doesn't need to know your name." The biker swallowed hard. For a man used to being judged by his tattoos, his scars, and his jacket, her words hit him deeper than he expected. "Thank you," he finally said, his voice breaking. She just nodded, waved, and climbed into her old sedan. As she drove away, she felt a strange warmth spread through her chest, a feeling she hadn't known in years. It wasn't comfort or relief, it was peace. The next morning, she went about her usual day, feeding her cat, watering her little garden, and hoping her small pension check would arrive soon. She didn't think much about the biker again. To her it was a simple act, something any decent person would have done. But miles away, that biker couldn't stop thinking about her. Her wrinkled hands, her gentle voice, her words, "Kindness doesn't need to know your name." It played in his head over and over. That night, he told his friends, members of a local biker group called the Iron Sons, about what happened. They weren't just any riders. They were a brotherhood who believed in loyalty and respect. And when they heard about the woman who gave away her last $10 to help a stranger, they all went silent. Then their leader, a man named Hawk, slammed his fist on the table and said, "Boys, tomorrow morning we ride." They didn't know her name. They didn't know where she lived. But they knew what she looked like, and that was enough. The next morning, as the sun rose over the small town, the distant rumble of 50 motorcycles echoed down the quiet streets. Curtains opened. Neighbors peeked out, wondering what was happening. Margaret stepped out onto her porch, holding a cup of tea, when she saw them, rows of motorcycles lined up in front of her old house, chrome glinting in the sunlight. Her heart nearly stopped. Margaret froze on her porch, her trembling hands gripping the edge of her teacup, as the low rumble of vengeance filled the quiet street. The sound was deep and steady, like a wave of thunder rolling toward her home. Then, one by one, the riders parked their bikes along the sidewalk. 50 of them at least, their leather jackets marked with the same symbol, the Iron Sons. Her neighbors peeked through their curtains, whispering in confusion. To them, it looked like a scene from a movie, an old woman in a faded cardigan standing before an army of bikers. The leader, a broad-shouldered man with a thick gray beard and a jacket that read Hawk, stepped forward, holding something in his hands, a small brown envelope. His face, though rough and lined from years of riding, carried a quiet gentleness. "Ma'am," he said, taking off his sunglasses, "are you the one who helped a stranded rider yesterday?" Margaret blinked, unsure what to say. I gave a young man $10 for gas," she replied. "Was that one of yours?" Hawk nodded. "That was my nephew, Jake. He told us what you did. Said you gave him your last bit of money." Margaret's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "Oh, that was nothing," she murmured. "Just seemed like the right thing to do." Hawk smiled softly. "That's exactly what makes it everything." He motioned behind him, and the rest of the riders stepped forward. They carried something large, wrapped in a silver tarp. Hawk turned back to her and said, "We came to return your kindness, ma'am. $10 doesn't sound like much, but what you gave wasn't money, it was compassion. And we don't forget that." With that, two bikers pulled the tarp away, revealing a brand new car. It wasn't flashy, but it was clean, reliable, and shining in the sunlight, a world apart from her rusted sedan that barely started. Margaret gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my goodness. I can't accept this. It can't possibly," but Hawk gently placed the envelope in her hand. "It's already done. The title's in your name. We even paid your insurance for the year. There's something else inside." Her hands shook as she opened the envelope. Inside was a note written in neat handwriting. "To the woman who reminded us what real strength looks like, thank you for showing us humanity still exists. Ride safe, live kind. The Iron Sons." Tears filled her eyes, blurring the words. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. Hawk smiled. "You already said it when you handed Jake that $10. Kindness doesn't need to know your name. You gave without asking. We're just giving it back." For the first time in years, Margaret felt truly seen, not as a poor, forgotten widow scraping by, but as someone whose simple act of goodness had moved hearts. The bikers stayed for a while, fixing her old fence, painting her porch, and sharing stories over lemonade. Laughter filled the air where loneliness once lived. The street that had been silent for years now echoed with life and gratitude. As the afternoon sun began to fade, Hawk and his riders got ready to leave. The engines roared once more, but this time the sound didn't frighten anyone. It filled the town with awe. Before leaving, Hawk turned back one last time and said, "You'll never ride alone, ma'am." "Not after this." Margaret waved, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, "Thank you, all of you." That night, as she sat in her new car, she looked up at the stars and smiled. She had indeed just helped a man on a motorcycle. She had touched the hearts of 50 strangers who carried her kindness farther than she could ever imagine. Sometimes she realized the smallest acts of giving return in the loudest, most unexpected ways. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who believes kindness is never wasted. Subscribe for more real-life stories of love, humanity, and the power of compassion.